In 1966, General Motors did something almost unthinkable. They killed their own engine. Not because it didn't work, not because people didn't want it, but because they were terrified of what it represented. This wasn't a quiet retirement. This was an execution. And the aftermath? It changed one of America's biggest companies forever. This is the story of the Chevrolet Corvair and how one revolutionary engine became so controversial that GM essentially banned it from ever being built again. Let's go back to 1960. Post-war America. The economy is booming. Families are growing. Applause. The American automotive industry is absolutely dominating the world. But there's a problem GM can't ignore. A little German car called the Volkswagen Beetle is quietly taking over the American small car market. It's cheap. It's reliable. It's fuel efficient. And American manufacturers have nothing that can compete with it. Ford tries with the Falcon. Plymouth has the Valiant. But these are just shrunken versions of regular American cars. Conventional front-engine designs made smaller and cheaper. Nothing revolutionary. Chevrolet's lead engineer, Ed Cole, walks into a meeting with an idea that sounds absolutely insane. He wants to build an American car with the engine in the back, air-cooled, rear-mounted, a flat-six boxer engine just like Porsche, just like Volkswagen. The room goes silent. Remember, this is 1959 America. Every single American car has the engine in the front. Big vates, long hoods. That's what American engineering looks like. Putting the engine in the back? That's what weird European cars do. But Ed Cole is convinced. He's studied the Beetle. He's studied Porsche. Shoot. He knows that a rear engine layout can create something special. Better weight distribution for a small car. More interior space because there's no transmission tunnel. Sportier handling because of that rear weight bias. GM leadership is skeptical, but Ed Cole has credibility. He's the guy who developed the small block Chevy V8, one of the most successful engines in automotive history. So they give him the green light. And in 1960, the Chevrolet Corvair arrives. It's unlike anything America has ever seen. Now, the engine is a 2.3-liter flat six, air-cooled, sitting behind the rear axle. No radiator, no water pumps, no coolant, just air flowing through cooling fins, simple and elegant. It produces 80 horsepower. Which doesn't sound like much, but remember, this is competing with the Beetle's 36 horsepower. The design is clean, almost European. No massive chrome grille because there's no radiator to cool. The front end is smooth, aerodynamic. The interior is spacious because the floor is almost completely flat. No transmission hump, no driveshaft tunnel, and people love it. First year, Corvair sells over 250,000 units. It's a genuine hit. GM starts expanding the lineup. They create the Corvair Monza, a sportier version with bucket seats and a 4-speed manual transmission. This thing becomes the unexpected star. Young people are buying Corvairs not because they're cheap, but because they're fun. By 1962, GM is selling more Monzas than base Corvairs. They've accidentally created America's first sporty compact car. This success leads to the Ford Mustang, the whole pony car segment that defined the 1960s. The 1960s. It started because the Corvair Monza proved young Americans wanted sporty, affordable cars. Chevrolet goes further. In 1962, they release a turbocharged version of the Corvair. Think about how wild this is. Turbocharging barely exists in production cars. Porsche won't turbocharge a 911 until 1975. But here's Chevrolet in 1962, offering a turbocharged compact car for regular people. It makes 150 horsepower, nearly double the base engine. By 1964, they've got the Corsa, the top performance model with 180 horsepower. This little rear-engine Chevy is faster than many V8 muscle cars of the era. The Corvair represents everything bold about American engineering: innovation, risk-taking, the willingness to try something completely different. But there's a dark side to this story that's already unfolding, and it's about to tear everything apart. Because while Chevrolet's marketing department is celebrating their success, something else is happening. Letters are arriving at GM headquarters, reports from dealerships, insurance claims, accident reports. And they all say the same thing. Something is very wrong with how this car handles. Here's where we need to talk about physics and why putting an engine in the back of a car is actually really complicated. In a conventional car, The heavy engine is in the front and most of the weight is over the front wheels. This creates understeer. When you go into a turn too fast, the front end pushes wide. It's predictable. It's forgiving. You just ease off the gas and the car straightens out. But rear-engine cars are different. Most of the weight is in the back, behind the rear axle. This creates something called oversteer. You go into a turn too fast, the rear end wants to swing out. It's like a pendulum. And if you're not expecting it, if you panic and lift off the gas suddenly, that weight shift can make it worse. The car can spin. Porsche dealt with this by engineering incredible suspensions and teaching people how to drive rear-engine cars properly. Volkswagen dealt with it by making the Beetle slow and underpowered so it couldn't get into trouble. But Chevrolet, they made a decision that would haunt them. Keep costs down, they used a swing axle rear suspension. This was the same system Volkswagen used, but the Corvair was more powerful, faster, sportier. People were driving it harder, and swing axle suspension has a dangerous characteristic. Under hard cornering, when the suspension compresses, the rear wheels can tuck under, suddenly changing the angle of the tire. This causes a dramatic loss of grip. The rear end can snap out with almost no warning. Experienced drivers could handle it, but the Corvair was being sold to everyone. Families, young drivers, people who'd never driven anything but conventional American cars. The accidents started piling up. A driver takes a turn too fast, lifts off the gas, and the rear end whips around. Rollover accidents, single car crashes where the driver just lost control. And here's the thing, GM knew. Internal testing had shown the handling quirks. Engineers had written memos recommending suspension improvements. They'd even suggested adding a front anti-roll bar, which would cost about $15 per car and significantly improve stability. $15 times hundreds of thousands of cars, that's millions in additional costs. And the Corvair was supposed to be a budget car competing on price. So GM management made a choice. They added a small warning in the owner's manual about tire pressure. The Corvair needed significantly higher tire pressure in the rear than the front, 26 CI front, 15 SI rear. If you got this wrong, the handling got even worse. But who reads owner's manuals? How many gas station attendants are going to check and set different pressures front and rear? A lawsuit started, families who'd lost loved ones, people injured in accidents, and the plaintiff's lawyers started finding those internal GM memos. Documents showing that GM-owned engineers had identified problems and recommended fixes that were rejected. This is corporate negligence becoming public record, but GM is huge. They've got armies of lawyers. They're settling cases quietly, getting non-disclosure agreements, keeping it out of the press. The Corvair keeps selling. To most of America, it's still just an innovative, fun little car. Then Ralph Nader enters the story. Nader is a young lawyer, 31 years old, and he's been researching automotive safety. He's been looking at accident reports, talking to engineers, reviewing court cases, and he keeps seeing the Corvair show up again and again. In 1965, he publishes Unsafe at Any Speed, the designed in dangers of the American automobile. The first chapter is devastating. It's called The Sporty Corvair, the one-car accident. Nader lays out everything. The swing axle suspension problems, the oversteer characteristics, the internal GM memos showing they knew about the issues, the cost-cutting decisions that prioritize profit over safety. There, he tells stories, real people. A 19-year-old girl killed when her Corvair rolled over on a gentle curve. A family of 4 in a crash. Specific, heartbreaking cases with names and faces. And he asks a simple question: if GM-owned engineers recommended safety improvements that cost $15 per car, and GM said no, what does that say about the company's values? The book becomes a phenomenon. Suddenly everyone is talking about the Corvair. News segments, magazine articles. Congressional hearings about automotive safety. GM response is what takes this from a PR problem to a corporate catastrophe. Instead of addressing the safety concerns, instead of announcing improvements or defending their engineering, GM hires private investigators to follow Ralph Nader. They're trying to dig up dirt on him. They have people approach him in stores, trying to get him into compromising situations. They're investigating his personal life, his friends, looking for anything they can use to discredit him. The Nader figures it out. He goes public. He testifies before Congress that General Motors is harassing him instead of addressing safety concerns. The president of GM, James Roche, is hauled before a Senate subcommittee. On national television, he has to apologize to Ralph Nader. The head of one of the world's largest corporations apologizing to a 31-year-old lawyer for trying to intimidate him. It's humiliating, it's front-page news, and it makes everything Nader said about the Corvair seem true, whether it is or not. Now it's not just about car safety, it's about corporate arrogance, about a giant company trying to silence criticism, about profits versus people. Every Corvair on the road becomes a symbol. Sales start collapsing. Dealerships can't move inventory. The insurance industry starts flagging Corvairs as high risk. But here's what makes this even more tragic. In 1965, the same year Nader's book came out, Chevrolet released the second-generation Corvair, and they'd fixed everything. The 1965 Corvair is a completely different car. GM engineers had been working on improvements for years, and they'd created something remarkable. Gone is the swing axle suspension. The new Corvair has fully independent rear suspension, the same type Corvette uses. It's sophisticated, modern, and it completely eliminates the handling problems. The snap oversteer, gone. The unpredictable behavior, fixed. Car magazines test it and go crazy. Car and Driver calls it the most pleasant, most civilized car in America. Road and Track says it's one of the best handling American cars ever built. Motor Trend compares it favorably to Porsche. The second-generation Corvair is what Cole envisioned from the beginning. It's proof that the rear-engine concept could work, that American engineers could innovate and compete with European sports cars. But nobody cares. Nader's book has already defined the narrative. The Corvair is unsafe at any speed. Doesn't matter that they fixed it. Doesn't matter what the magazines say. The damage is permanent inside GM. Something else is happening. The boardroom conversations aren't about how to rebuild the Corvair's reputation. They're about liability, about lawsuits, about the company's image. Every Corvair accident, even in older models, is national news now. Every lawsuit mentions Nader's book. GM legal department is drowning in litigation. The Ford Mustang with its live rear axle could snap oversteer. The Chevy Corvette could bite inexperienced drivers. The VW Beetle, which used the same swing axle suspension as the Corvair, had similar handling characteristics. Cars in the 1960s were dangerous, period. No crumple zones, no airbags, no anti-lock brakes, no stability control, no side impact beams, steering wheels that could impale you in a crash, dashboards made of hard metal, gas tanks that could rupture and explode. By modern standards, every car from that era is a death trap. The Corvair's problems weren't unique. They were typical, but the Corvair was the one Ralph Nader chose to write about. The Corvair was the one that became the symbol. And once that narrative was established, facts didn't matter anymore. GM could have fought this. When the NHTS study came out in 1972, they could have used it to rehabilitate the Corvair's reputation. They could have said, look, we were right. The car was safe. They could have defended their engineers, their innovation, their willingness to try something different. But they didn't. Because by 1972, GM had already internalized the lesson they thought the Corvair taught them. Innovation is dangerous. The final Corvair rolled off the assembly line on May 14, 1969. No ceremony, no celebration, they just stopped building it. Total production over 9 years, 1.8 million units. That's not a failure by any objective measure, but it was treated like one. And the impact on GM culture was profound and long-lasting. Through the 1970s, while the oil crisis demanded innovation and fuel efficiency, GM was building massive, inefficient cars and then scrambling to downsize them poorly. The Vega, the Citation, the Cavalier. Generic, forgettable cars that people bought because they were cheap, not because they were good. In the 1980s, when Japanese manufacturers were revolutionizing build quality and reliability, GM was spending billions on factory automation that didn't work and producing cars that fell apart. In the 1990s, while Honda and Toyota were developing hybrid technology and improving efficiency, GM was killing the EV1 electric car project because they were afraid of the liability and the impact on their profitable SUV sales. Do you see the pattern? Every time GM had a chance to innovate, to take a risk, to try something different, they chose safety. Not safety for consumers, but safety for the company. Protection from liability. Protection from risk. The Corvair taught them that being different was dangerous. So they stopped being different. And their market share reflects it. In 1960, when the Corvair launched, GM had a nearly 50% of the U.S. auto market. By 2009, when they declared bankruptcy, they were down to 19%. Half a century of decline, and so much of it traces back to a culture that valued caution over creativity. Meanwhile, the companies that thrived were the ones willing to take risks. Honda put a tiny four-cylinder engine in the Civic and made it sporty. Toyota built the Prius when everyone said hybrids would never sell. Tesla put batteries in a sports car when the entire industry said electric cars couldn't be cool. These companies succeeded because they were willing to try things that might fail. They understood that innovation requires risk. GM forgot that. Or more accurately, the Corvair scared them so badly they convinced themselves that risk wasn't worth it. Here's the really tragic part. Ed Cole, the engineer who championed the Corvair, who fought to build something different, went on to become president of GM in 1967. You'd think he would have defended his creation, would have fought to restore the company's innovative spirit. But even he couldn't overcome the institutional fear. The legal departments had too much power. The accountants had too much say. The culture had changed. Today, Corvairs have a devoted following. Enthusiasts restore them, modify them, race them. There's a Corvair society with thousands of members, people who understand what the car really was, an ambitious, innovative design that was ahead of its time and scapegoated for problems the entire industry shared. These enthusiasts know something GM forgot. The Corvair wasn't a failure of engineering. It was a failure of courage. The car worked. The second-generation model proved it. What failed was GM's willingness to stand behind their innovation, to defend their engineers, to believe in something different even when it became difficult. And that's what makes this story so important. It's about what happens when fear replaces vision, when legal liability becomes more important than engineering excellence, when playing it safe seems smarter than taking chances. The Corvair engine wasn't banned by the government. Ralph Nader never called for it to be illegal. No regulation forced GM to stop building it. It was banned by fear. By lawyers worried about lawsuits, by executives worried about their stock price, by a corporate culture that decided innovation wasn't worth the risk and the cost of that decision. It's hard to calculate. How many engineers left GM because they couldn't innovate? How many great ideas died in meetings because someone said, "Remember the Corvair?" How many customers chose Honda or Toyota because GM cars became boring and unreliable? GM spent decades recovering from a decision made in 1966. They finally declared bankruptcy in 2009. The government had to bail them out. The company that once employed 1 in every 50 American workers had to be saved from itself. Could they have avoided that if they'd kept the innovative spirit that created the Corvair? We'll never know. But we do know that the companies that thrived were the ones willing to take risks. Here's what I think about when I look at this story. A.D. Cole believed in something different. He convinced one of the world's largest companies to take a chance, and for a moment it worked. The Corvair was genuinely innovative, genuinely different, genuinely good. When it became controversial, GM had a choice. They could have stood behind it, defended it, improved it, and proven the critics wrong. The engineering was there. The second-generation car proved that. Instead, they backed down. They killed it quietly, and they never took that kind of risk again. So here's my question for you. Was GM right to play it safe? Should they have killed the Corvair and banned the rear engine concept? Or did they kill the very thing that made them great? Because I think the answer to that question matters. Not just for understanding automotive history, but for understanding what happens when companies, when people, when entire industries choose safety over innovation. The Corvair story is a warning about what we lose when we let fear make our decisions, about what dies when we stop taking chances. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to see more stories about the innovations that changed automotive history, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.